6 members are present, 1 absent.
Thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag Welcome to the November 19th regular school board meeting. I just want to mention I missed a meeting or two and had a procedure done. And while I was under anesthetic, Jason was officially the school board chairperson and my security detail. I hope they didn't interfere with your work.
It worked well.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, let's look at the agenda, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
And any discussion, additions, or changes? Hearing none, call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Community comment. Anybody like to make a comment tonight to the board? Seeing none, we will move on to recognition, awards, and presentations. And first, we'll have our DECA students come forward.
Do you guys want to present something on, or do you want to just, are you going to present something on the video? Okay. Does Drew have it back there in the technology? Drew, do you have it?
I think they want to run the computer, don't they?
Yeah. Something on the computer. They have something on Google. You guys want to grab it? And then, is anybody going to speak? So the mic's right here. So if you want to speak or say something, or
Hello, my name is Kelsey DeMars, and I've been in Faribault DECA for 3 years.
Hi, I'm Bennett Wolf, and this is my first year in DECA.
I'm Erica Johnsrud. This is my 3rd year in DECA. My name is Madeline Way, and this is my 3rd year in DECA.
And my name is Gabrielle Holland, and this is also my 3rd year in DECA.
We are here today to update you on what we did last year and our goals for the upcoming year. By being here, we are successfully completing our promotional campaign and our global entrepreneurship campaign, and we will have a chance to compete at ICDC in Orlando this year. We are motivated to do this because we want to promote Faribault DECA in our community and in our schools.
We are a business co-curricular student organization. We have a very diverse group of kids from the grade of 9th through 12th. Our members, we attend a leadership conference. We compete at many competitions. We run a community service project. We play in the stock market game, and we also compete in a virtual business competition. Our competitions vary from districts to state and then also the international level. So a DECA recap from 2017 to 2018. We have 11 members that have qualified for the ICDC conference, along with 38 students advancing to the state and 12 district champs. Here's a picture of us winning our trophy. We got 2nd place in the marketing plan production. And throughout this is just our achievements that we've had so far.
Just to continue on some more of our achievements, 4 members got high exam scores at state, which is pretty amazing. We received gold recertification in the school-based enterprise. Our virtual business team placed 11th place at the international conference, which was held in Atlanta last year. We received Thrive Awards in the membership campaign, global entrepreneurship campaign, and the promotional campaign, which also went to the international competition. And we had a team finish in 9th place at the Minnesota State Personal Finance Competition, which is a personal finance knowledge bowl. So goals for the 2018-2019 year, we will increase student membership by having members participate in more team building activities, such as the Fall Leadership Conference that was in Minneapolis a few weeks ago. We will receive the Thrive Award in our chapter campaigns, successfully run a community service project with Sweet Dreams for Kids, and that's a picture of a school-wide pajama day that we organized for it. And also create an informative commercial program for the new scoreboards in Nomeland Gymnasium, and those will play at basketball games.
So we are here for our promotional campaign to raise awareness for Faribault DECA in our community and our schools. So far, we have updated the DECA showcase at the high school. It's brand new. We have some new trophies in there. We hosted a DECA informational booth at our open house to get more members to join. We also successfully interviewed DECA alumni, and Gabby and I also presented at in our PAC for a recruitment meeting. We also have presented now to the school board, BNI, and KDHL.
So our global entrepreneurship campaign. For our campaign, we have to complete the following. We have to complete the idea challenge. We are promoting DECA to a bunch of Faribault different committees. We have been placing posters around the school about successful entrepreneurs. We have also been sending Twitter messages with a bunch of successful entrepreneurs. And then we also have conducted interviews with successful entrepreneurs from Fitness in Motion, Erickson Chiropractor, and then Weichert Realtors Heartland.
So what can DECA do for you? Our DECA program is always looking for people that are willing to partner with us to accomplish the following. We want to further our marketing projects and research problems. Also, the mentors are a really big part of this. In order to continue to go on to state and ICDC, we need people that are willing to help us and willing to put forth the effort. Also, we have a community service project, which most of the people at Faribault High School are doing now, and we're just looking forward to having you guys continue to support us in that. Oh, thank you for allowing us to present.
Thank you. Congratulations on your work. Any questions or comments from the board?
Mr. Chair, can I just ask, Mr. Kegler, how many students do you have in it this year compared to previous years?
2 years ago we had 82. Last year we dipped down to about 60, and we're back up into the low 80s again this year.
Once again, congratulations. My daughter's one of the students, and I think any parent or grandparent or aunt or uncle or friend that's here in the audience or watching on TV, if your son or daughter is interested in anything business-related type of thing outside of high school, and you're not involved in this program, you're absolutely missing the boat. What a tremendous opportunity for all of these students, and whether they go on to college or don't go on to college, but what a great opportunity. And Mr. Kegler, to you and Mr. Dunnigan, great job. Kudos.
Okay, thank you.
Can I-
Okay, yeah.
Of the group there, who wants to start their own business? Only 2 out of 3 or 2 out of 5? That's right. So, but yeah, I graduated with a guy, well, of course, it was in the 60s, so DECA was around. And without going to college, he started to buy these franchises, fast food. He's got a whole bunch of them all over the state. The guy's a multimillionaire without even going to college, even though go to college. Definitely, but he was through DECA, and he just worked his way up, and now it's, he doesn't really have to work anymore.
Anybody else? Thank you. Our next item is probably a DECA national qualifier, is that correct?
Did I pick the right mic? Okay, this one works. All right, first of all, Matt Steigen, Community Relations. We're going to be making kind of an ongoing effort here throughout the school year to keep our television audience as well as you guys informed about the great accomplishments of our students here.
Can he stand someplace where he's in the camera? Or so?
Yeah, do we have a camera for Brett?
Sit down.
Go right
come
by
up here.
Matt. Yep.
Yeah, you can come over here, I guess. So yeah, we're going to be celebrating the accomplishments of students throughout the year. And the first one we're going to talk about here is Mr. Thomas. I talked to him last week for a story you might have read on our website and in the Daily News. Brett's a senior at Faribault High School. He recently qualified for nationals in the Virtual Business Challenge, which is a computer simulation business competition that is available through the DECA program that we just heard about. Brett ran a virtual restaurant online and used the lessons he learned in his business classes at the high school to earn a top score of over $8 million as a restaurant owner in a 5-year simulation. That score placed him first in the state of Minnesota in his division and second out of 48 competitors in the central region, which cuts down the middle of the country, so several states. He was second out of 48 competitors. And he will compete in another business simulation at nationals in April in Orlando. And Brett does plan to own his own business someday. So congratulations to Brett. All right, and then I also want to bring up Ruby, our cross-country runner. We'll do both of these two at the same time here. And Brett, you can just stand to the side for a second. Ruby is a sophomore for our girls cross-country team. She placed 5th at the Big Nine competition for a team that performed the best of any Falcons team over the last 21 years in the girls conference meet. At the Section 1A meet in Owatonna, she placed 11th out of 112 runners in one of the toughest sections in the entire state with a time of 19 minutes and 8 seconds for 5K, under 6 minutes per mile, I think. That qualified her for state for the second time in her career, and she's only a sophomore. At the state meet, she improved 18 places from her 8th grade performance and placed 120th at Northfield. So congratulations on a great season, Ruby. And that's it?
I think we have a swimmer, don't we?
We have
Is
a
that
couple
coming?
swimmers, don't
Yeah,
we?
Charlie's right here. He's gonna-
Oh, we got our swimming qualifiers too.
Yep.
Keith didn't inform me that he was inviting the swimmers, so I'm going to let each of them tell you about how their state swim meet went. Go ahead, girls.
Yeah, bring Charlie.
Both these young ladies qualified for the state meet, and both of them placed at the state meet. So the swimming is done on a prelim day, and then they do a finals day. So they had to swim well both days. And Verity placed in the 100 backstroke. I think he was 15th in the 100 backstroke. Abby was 6th in the 500 freestyle, which top 8 is all state. And she was also 9th in the 200 freestyle. So both of them had a really good state meet, and I believe this is their 3rd time up there. Second for Verity and 3rd for Abby, and they're both 10th graders, so we're looking forward to more.
Coach Fuller, in case some people don't get the Daily News, can you just announce their last names as well?
Verity Ray Roboldi, now Roboli, and Abby Larson.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Coach Fuller, I understand you had another award that you were able to recognize another person on your staff.
Okay, actually I have 2. Abby was the Section 1A swimmer of the meet this year too. But also my daughter was voted the Section Assistant Coach of the Year. So nice to have her.
Great. Thank you. I'd ask all 4 winners to come and shake our hands and try to look at the camera once.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thanks and congratulations to all. Our next item of business is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to consider the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. There is no discussion. No one wants to pull any events or any items. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item 6 are retirements. This is an action item, and we have the retirements of, or did I miss something? No.
Yeah, there should be one.
Retirements of Barbara Piper and Christine Gorman.
Barb Piper.
Barb Piper, okay.
Yep. And that, yeah, just Barb. Yeah, Barb
Oh.
is the only retirement that we have.
Okay,
Yep.
sorry.
Christine was in the consent agenda.
Okay. So just the retirement of Barbara Piper. Is there a motion to consider this retirement?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Next item is the finance report.
Hi.
And welcome, Jen. Thank you.
I will be giving a short report on the Finance Committee meeting and then talking about the abatement bonds, a little bit more information and asking for action on that. So the Finance Committee, the main part of our meeting on last week was discussing the bank RFP that we sent out. We sent the RFP out to all 6 banks that had a physical presence in Faribault, and we got 6 responses. We contracted with Ellers to run the RFP so that it would be completely objective and a third party processing the information, and they came and gave us a report. And after quite a lengthy and lively discussion, we decided to narrow it down to 2 options, CCF and State Bank of Faribault. We will be interviewing those 2 banks, the business office, over the course of the next couple of weeks, and then we will bring the information from those interviews back to the board at the December board meeting to make a decision.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Can I just interrupt you 1 second here? With regards to the RFP and whatnot, in the minutes, it says I abstained on the ADM counts and I abstained on the RFP.
Oh, okay,
So
well, we
it
will
just has
fix
it
that in the
flip-flopped,
minutes.
so thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, then I'm not sure, I know it's an attachment with regard to the abatement bonds. I don't know, I'm not sure how to get it up, the attachments up on the screen.
Drew can draw one. Yep.
If we could look at the bus and parking lot cost estimates. And then we will look at the actual diagrams, and we do have Wold here to answer any questions about the Lincoln and Jefferson projects. But the cost estimates for the Lincoln project, the Jefferson project, and then also resurfacing our maintenance facility parking lot in the Bruce Smith Field, which we do own and is very poor shape, is about $1.87 million. As you remember, we talked last school board meeting about the abatement bond, and the cost of the bond is such that we don't want to pick too few projects to maximize the amount or the cost of issuing the bonds. So at this dollar amount, the tax impact for a $200,000 home would be about $12 per year, $12 to $16 per year. And that is based on the information that is on your board packet and that I shared at the last board meeting, the per $1 million amount on the bond. The Lincoln project, do you guys, I wish we could get it up on the board. Oh, okay, they're trying, okay.
Jennifer, the numbers you just mentioned are slightly different in our tax sheet, the tax impact sheet?
Yes, the tax, I did not update the tax
Oh.
impact sheet. That gave us the amount for $1 million. This is 1.8 million, so I'm just extrapolating out.
Gotcha, okay, thank you.
Because we have not asked to get
Thank you.
exact tax impact at
Okay.
this point in time.
Thanks.
These are the cost estimates right now. But we do need to have the board approve moving forward with these so that we can start doing the actual work, the soil borings and other projects. There would not be the resolution to have the abatement bond hearing until the February school board meeting. So we're not asking for a resolution to issue the bonds right now. We're asking for an action to approve moving forward.
So let me ask a question. There's obviously costs associated with soil borings and whatnot.
Yes, so we will be incurring costs.
And we obviously have some turnover on this board that's happening.
Right.
And so, in theory, we could approve to move forward and do soil borings. Bless you. We could find out the results. The new board in January, February could vote to not move forward with it. Not recommended probably, but.
Right, I assume that would be possible. We can use, if for whatever reason this did not proceed, we could use our long-term facilities maintenance funds to pay for the work that needs to be done now. And these projects are on our list, so I don't think the work would be for naught. But certainly I would hope that a future board would take into consideration what this board is deciding to do. Well, I know you all got the board packet, so we will, since we don't have it up, the idea would be to put, well, actually, Sal, it is up. Oh, it's up now?
Just have to put it on.
Oh, that part, yes. So that's the cost estimates, and that's where I got the $1.870 million. Then we do have a diagram of the Jefferson lot, if that could be brought up. And that would be creating the bus loop for 10 buses, and then extending the parking lot we'll need permission from the city out to the road where it's kind of cut off, and adding several new parking spaces there. And that's part of our safe and secure areas that we've talked about, and then also doing the same for Lincoln. And hopefully,
Do you think the city will approve it?
approved extending the parking lot at Jefferson.
Yeah.
I don't know at this point. We have not approached them about that.
You
The
have
project
appro-
is not contingent on that, however. It would just be a nice loop for parents to be able to exit as they're dropping off,
So you need city approval.
to do that part of it. To do that part. But that is, like I say, that would be a nice to have, but not necessary.
Jennifer, under the Jefferson one,
Yes.
it appears that there's a softball or a baseball field. And I'm not sure if you know or if Kane knows how often that field gets used, because I believe there are, according to this diagram, it looks like there's 4 fields right now, 2 to the east and 2 to the west. And I'm just curious if that field gets used a lot, or if, if the fire department there, or if that's a lot of summer stuff through you know, the community center, or, and maybe it's just been there
And-
forever and it never gets used, I don't know.
Yeah, and
the answer.
actually, the plans that we're looking at would not encroach on that space.
Well,
It's right over it.
Yeah, it's right over the top.
But it looks like it goes right over it.
There's a fourth one that you are gonna go right over for the bus route.
Are you looking
Oh.
at Jefferson, right?
Yeah, Jefferson.
So
Do you see
we can
that
go
one?
back, we can go back and make sure that those questions are answered before moving forward, to check to see how much those are used. I know that the one on the southeast side is not used very often. And maybe that can be one that, if the one that's on the northwest side gets used more, we can shift those things down. But we'll check them out though.
Is there any chance that that's going to require a holding pond for water, for increasing the impervious surface?
Or, I think, do you want to ask Sal to come up? She'll
Sal?
be able to answer that one for us, or Paul, or whoever's up there.
It is possible, so good evening, everybody. I'll talk to you a little bit more later. So the budgets are set up as such that we could create a holding pond if so needed, so that's included in the budget right now, and obviously if we don't have to, then that would just be money you wouldn't have to bond for or could be used for other projects. One thing that'll be interesting to see how the city interprets is bringing the existing buildings up to par from a stormwater perspective, as you don't have holding ponds currently, so we did leave a contingency in for that.
Okay, great, thank you.
So walk us through the steps that'll happen if this gets approved here, and then with the city, and how fast does all that ramp up? And
Sure. So we'd want to probably start meeting with the city right away to make sure our concept meets their intents, especially making sure it works for traffic. Generally, getting the buses off of the street is going to improve traffic quite a bit. You'd want to start on soil borings and getting surveys done right away, because that'll inform the design of the parking lot, the section of how much rock or sand is underneath the parking lot. So those things would start right away, and that's a 6 to 8 week process, depending on how busy they are. Usually you issue RFPs, have a couple weeks for those, and then they might take 3 to 4 weeks to produce the report. And then you'd have a civil engineer work on the design. We could meet with users to talk about expectations for the exact design or how the impact for that softball field. So we've really set up budgets and concept diagrams, but we'd dive further into design with the intent of doing construction in summer of 2019.
And Sal and Jennifer, we had originally talked about extending that road where that southwest parking is. That's not in the diagram, but is that something that we're still considering with the city?
Yeah, I think a new version of the diagram has showed that we're trying to connect back through to 10th.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was the road that, I don't know what several means, but several years ago was actually dead end.
Yeah, so there might be something with the city that, some rationale for why they did do that, so. And maybe it was because the buses were over there.
I would anticipate, but I could be completely wrong on this, that whole strip there is, I think, ends up being staff parking throughout the day and whatnot. So I do not believe you could, or I wouldn't recommend that you open that up during the day as you have all those parked cars in there.
Oh,
That, you know what I'm saying, that
because you think it'll just be a drive-through for people?
yeah, I mean, you
And
have,
that's what it was before.
Yeah.
That's probably why it got closed off in the first place, was for
yeah.
safety and parking.
And
Yeah.
you'd have to go back and find out, but it might have been when they did one of the additions and brought more staff over there when they closed one of the previous elementary schools, and they needed more staff. But
And the schools use that space for their fire drills. They walk the kids across that parking lot over into the field. So
You don't
those are
want
all things that you'd have to think about. They'd be crossing a street then, not just a closed off parking area. I just think those are all things to consider.
That's good to know. The other one
Sure.
too on there is the center island. We talked about maybe eliminating that or doing something else with it, or we had a little bit of conversation, and again, that's mainly to get some feedback from you guys to see what you feel. Right now, parking's really tight in there. If you ever park there during parent-teacher conferences, maybe putting a couple more parking spaces in there may help too.
Yeah, actually, this plan calls for expanding the parking lot by 12 spots. And I apologize, this is the, not the most recent diagram. So the most recent diagram shows that potentially those 12 extra spaces would either be in that triangle or just, I guess it would be north of where we would propose to join back up with 10th. if
does
that
anybody have access to that diagram that they're able to pull up?
The new one?
Yeah.
I think, except for I can't pull it up here. I could send it to Drew and pull it up. But I'll do that, and then you guys can go to the next one too.
Any questions about Lincoln that you would like us to consider as we move forward?
I'm all in favor of making these places safer. If you have not driven by one of these schools from 2:55 to 3:05, Monday through Friday, do yourself a favor and take a little drive by. And you know, a lot of it is not the students. It's every mom and dad that wants to run their kid in between buses across the street and doesn't use the crosswalk on one end of the street or the other. And I get it, everybody's in a hurry, but it's just, we're really lucky nobody's gotten seriously hurt recently at either one of these schools, because it is absolutely insane.
Right. So were you able to find that time?
Not yet.
So I don't know if you want to wait to get that, or if we want to go ahead and take a vote now.
A couple things. First of all, just to be clear, this is a board-approved levy.
Yes, so this is an abatement bond. It is a board-approved levy for the express and only purpose of addressing parking lots or parking ramps.
Okay, so to head off any questions, the reason we don't use this method on putting a new entrance on someplace is that by law, it can only apply to parking lots and
Correct.
those types of things.
Yes.
The amounts that you're showing are per $1 million. There's different 10 years and 15 years. We'll make that determination.
And we'll make that
on
determination when we get closer to that time.
There are really 5 attachments on this action item, but we're not approving the plans for Jefferson or Lincoln. What
Correct.
you're asking us to approve is the going forward with pursuing this abatement levy.
Yes.
And we're not even approving the levy, just allowing you to proceed to
Proceed.
look at that. Okay.
Correct.
Everybody clear on that?
But look, do you have any idea the cost to proceed, you know, in terms of soil boring and all that type of stuff? I mean, obviously it comes out of the big picture, assuming that if this board approves it and the future board in 2019 approves it, right? So it's all in there. What's the cost for this? Any
We
guess?
could certainly bring that back at a future, maybe at the next board meeting, cost breakdown of design fees and what the soil borings and surveys might take, or at least an estimate.
But since we want to start proceeding before then, do you have just even a ballpark?
I mean, it's got to be done. You can't
Right.
report it out, but I'm just asking the question.
Question, was this part of the original $86 million that the building bond, was this part of it too? Part of it was parking lots?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah, it was.
okay.
The parking lots at the maintenance facility in Bruce Smith Field were not.
Oh, yeah.
But
that's
the
true.
solutions to get the
others-
buses off the street at Lincoln
Which
and
is most
Jefferson
of the
were.
expense,
Yeah.
Jefferson and Lincoln.
Correct.
Do you think that people will say, what do you, we voted it down, now you're bringing it back? That, you know, you guys are doing this on your own without voter approval. That's all I'm gonna really say, is just, plus you're trying to address the whole safety issue, and I think that with that $1 million we got for safety, and then you got this, but then, you know, with the new board, they're gonna be talking about maybe securing entrance. I have no idea what they're gonna do. Isn't it a little piecemeal on this one?
I wouldn't take the defeat of the levy last year as an indication the community doesn't want us to make appropriate changes in the district. I doubt that the main reason they voted was they didn't want these parking lots redone. So I would think we would want to go forward with this and try to take advantage of our bonding authority to accomplish something that needs to be done.
And Richard, I think when we sat here last year, at least for myself, we were not aware, I was not aware of this abatement issue for parking lots. We didn't become aware of it until Roosevelt was done, and at that point it was too late so we couldn't use it for that. I also think by doing this, it allows us to stretch that long-term funding money into other areas that that Kane and his team can use it on. And it addresses safety and, yes, we have to be concerned what the taxpayer thinks, without question, but at the same token, as a board, we have to continue to move this district forward, and if this funding is there and these parking lots need it, I think we have an obligation to, one, safety-wise, and number two, have them up to code or up to use type of thing if they're falling apart, so. And I definitely know they were part of the bond last year, so.
And just one other point, you mentioned the $1 million, wasn't $1 million that we got from the state, but close to that for safety improvements at 3 buildings.
Correct.
Yeah, that can't be used for parking lots.
Correct.
Okay, just to clarify that.
I'll add one more thing. Richard, I think you bring up a good point. This feels a bit piecemeal, but I also would say, sometimes you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? This is not how I would proceed with all of this if we had passed the bond and were able to do everything we wanted to do at once, but that would be the perfect. We can't let that keep us from doing the good, in my opinion. So I think that's a fair point, absolutely, and that's how I would address it to the community if they ask us. I'd like to do this in a different way, but we're using the tools we have to do what we can, and so that's how I think is the right response to that.
So Drew has it. He's going to put up Jefferson here in just a second, if you want to see it. It wasn't that much different than the drawing that you just saw.
Can you put it up on these front TVs too?
Yeah, I think so. Can you put on the other one too, Drew? There it is.
So if we pan down a little bit, the only major difference between this diagram and the one you have in your packet is the idea of potentially exploring a reconnecting through to 10th. Obviously, we need to talk to the city about that and more users, as well as adding about a dozen parking spots in a couple locations. Get the pan down.
Is it gonna be signed like for buses only?
For the bus loop on the north?
So that parents don't drive in there and park?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
General Helmholtz School District operate them, that there's signage and training definitely needed.
Okay.
Could you pan that down too, Drew, so we can see the bottom of the parking lot? Or maybe, yeah, thanks, Paul.
Oh, it's on the front computer. I thought he was
Be
controlling it.
easier to do it from there. There we go.
I got you.
Thank you.
Now we're cooking with
I
gas.
could-
So likely wouldn't add parking stalls in the center triangle and on the north side near 10th over there, but those are two possible areas where we could expand the amount of available parking at Jefferson, as it is quite tight right now.
Just a question, Sal. I don't know what the cost would be to widen this out, but if you could diagonal park on that side too. you could
That'd be
pick
another
up
good
a lot
option.
more
Yeah.
stalls, But I don't know if you can or can't.
So I think as we go through this and look at the design more carefully, those would be all options we could consider.
I would recommend that you talk to the city right away. I'm always skeptical of the city. Get their approvals or they change it, what they want, well, it won't work for us, type of thing. So I'm just scared. Is that a nice way? Work with the city. It just.
Okay, I think I can frame a motion, and that motion would be to approve authorizing the administration to go forward pursuing this bonding mechanism for the purpose of parking lots with anticipated expenses prior not to exceed $50,000. And those $50,000, it's understood, if we do incur them, would be coming out of alternative facilities money.
Long-term facilities.
Long-term
maintenance
facilities
money,
money.
yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you.
And then
Thank
I
you.
don't know if you had any questions on the enrollment or finance reports, but I would be happy to answer those if you do.
Just quickly, we are still up 40 students from projections?
Yeah, we did dip slightly. We dipped by 15, but our projection was 34.90, and right now we're at 35.25.
Okay, that's a report. We have gifts and, oh, excuse me. Any further discussion on that? Okay, gifts and donations, and once again, the sheet I printed home. I forget. Everybody else has got it.
It's a team.
Yeah. Okay, the following is a resolution accepting gifts and donations, and this is a resolution item. First of all, Nurse Strand Charter School, 28 HP computers and 21 HP monitors for Faribault Public Schools Technology Department. 2, Robert Bosch LLC, $500 for the robotics program. 3, family of Abigail Teskey, grade 7 middle school, donation to purchase shirts for fellow band students. 4, the Boys Basketball Association and the Girls Basketball Association, $5,761.44 for backboards, 2 at each elementary school. And 5, Edward Duspabic, $1,000 to help student with athletic fees. So is there a motion to consider these items?
So moved.
And
Second.
It's moved and seconded, and any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, can I just, all these donations are fabulous, but I think number 4, which Andre is a board member of the Boys Basketball Association, but I just think it's a great partnership between the youth associations and the school district that an association kicks in nearly $6,000 to put in 6 new glass backboards and rims and whatnot. And that's essentially a thank you gesture for all the practice time that happens in those gyms and whatnot. So I just wanted to point that out.
Well stated, thank you. Any further discussion? Mr. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Tom?
Aye.
Chad?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Myself, aye. John?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Mr. Chair, it passes 6-0.
Thank you. Moving on to item 8, I understand there is no insurance committee report, and we will have a community education report from Anne Marie.
Good evening. I just wanted a quick report about a parent meeting we had last Thursday, if that's okay with you, Todd?
Yeah.
Okay, great. We had a district-wide Somali Parent Advisory Council meet. We had 26 parents that convened. Of the 25 parents that showed up, they represented over 100 students that are currently being served pre-K-12. So that's quite a big representation by 26 parents. So that was fun. I was able to gather kind of the data behind where their students are attending. What the big goals of the day were 3 things. One was to share common concerns regarding Somali students in Faribault schools, to introduce focus group parents, and to develop solid partnerships between parents and teachers. Teachers were not there, but we had building principals. Almost everyone was able to get away for an hour and a half and meet with these parents. So it was just a really tremendous opportunity, facilitated by Miriam Muhammad, partnership with Somali Community Resettlement Services. A lot of good information came out of that hour and a half session. Some good food was served, sambusa, of course, so that was wonderful. But just a lot of concerns, again, that parents are just sharing with us about just wanting to make sure that their kids are as successful as possible. So it was excellent. That's it.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that too, it was a really good meeting, and the group of some of the Somali leaders that were there really said that they want to be a sounding board for these parents, but sometimes they skip that sounding board and they go right to the principals to complain about different issues. And the leadership in the Somali community wants to work with our leadership team to make sure everybody's on the same page so that everybody's getting the same message. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Kind of went right back to our theme of every Falcon every day, and very pleased at the outcome.
Okay,
Thank you. Yep.
Any additional questions? Thank you, Anne Marie. Next item is H, Policy Committee, a report.
Do you want me to report?
Yeah.
So these are just being brought for our first reading. All of them are first readings, right?
They are.
Yeah, and they're just they're things that, some of them have been on the books with us, others have not been, but they're things that should be in our policies. And we're not making up the wording and stuff that they're telling us has to be in there, so it's kind of boring, guys.
Well, I think the one thing that we did bring back was the parent and coaches policy.
That's true.
Yep. So that was good, and I think that was a nice a work accumulated by the coaches, our activities director and high school principal, and I met together with all the head coaches, and we brainstormed a little bit of how we can do a better job of supporting the coaches out there. And the coaches, as many of you know, really they work really, really hard, number one, and sometimes it gets to be a pretty thankless job out there. So we created a policy specifically for the coaches to get the board support to talk about those processes and those steps that parents need to take before they come to the superintendent or the school board. So hopefully those will help with that communication. I think the big thing, though, is that when these coaches see that the board supports this, it's going to make another nice impact for showing the support.
Was there some MSBA, or is this ours totally?
It's actually, there's an MSBA,
combination.
it's kind of a combination. The harassment policy is MSBA's, and then this, even though a lot of this language is already included in the harassment policy, we really wanted to specifically say, parents and coaches, here are the steps and the procedures that should be gone through before you get to the superintendent or the board.
Okay, thank you. Any other?
I will just commend Todd and the administration, Jamie, Keith, and the coaches and the policy committee for working on that, because if the buck doesn't end up stopping with us, it's a runaway train, as you've read in the Star Tribune all last year about retired police officers getting out of coaching because it's more difficult to be a head coach in Brainerd than it is to be a 27-year officer on the police department. And it's, at some point, things have to chill out a little bit about that. And unfortunately, parents invest a tremendous amount of time in their students or their sons or daughters, extracurricular financially and time-wise, and it becomes a volatile issue. And so kudos to you guys for putting this in place. So.
Okay, thank you, Chad. Any other comments? All right, thank you. Again, those are the first readings, and they will come before the board for approval at our next regular business meeting. Other matters, consider approval of the this year's school calendar. It's a change. Is there a motion to consider this item?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, and as I understand it, what this does is formally change graduation from June 9th to June 2nd.
Nope, the graduation stays the same. It just moves the seniors back to the Friday.
Oh, okay.
And dismisses the seniors Friday rather than the following Tuesday.
Right.
So graduation's the same month.
And then that allows graduation to take
Correct.
place.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep, you got
Okay.
it.
So there's not that big gap.
Correct.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item B, approval of the district-wide goals. And again, this is an action item. Is there a motion to consider this item?
So moved.
I'll second. Discussion.
I can start. And the district-wide goals, whether you do call it the cart before the horse or the horse before the cart, we really wanted to throw those out there for our principals and our staff to take a look at to see whether or not they could support these goals. And they have, as you've seen all the presentations come through with the goals that they've put as part of our district goals. So I think we have a really nice, clear communication line with the district goals. The only problem is we've never really approved the district goals. And so, again, I would suggest and recommend that we do approve these goals because they do parallel a lot of the things that the principals and the staff are doing right now.
So, Mr. Chair, my only comment is I would appreciate next time we do these that we're involved in them a little more. And it looks like these are for 2 years. I think six goals are a lot to really focus in and change the narrative or move the needle. And I would just hope that we see measurables on each goal. So there's 6 instead of 4 type of thing. So that means there's more reporting that we're going to expect from you and your team. And I would hope that we see some type of measurables every 3 to 4 months at a minimum of how we're moving that needle on all 6 goals. So thank you.
I'll just point out generally, I'm not going to read them, but they come under the area of academic achievement, expanding programs towards a graduation rate of 100%, excellent facilities, Falcon Pride, and that goes along with climate and learning environments and safety, fiscal responsibility, which is always a goal for every district, communications, and diversification in our workforce staff. So the broad areas are excellent, and thanking you for bringing them to us.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that we do at less than 3 months. I hope that you're getting updates continually throughout the entire school year. But if there's something that's measurable that I can bring, that certainly will happen.
Okay, this is an actual, Tom.
Well, I have no complaints about any of the 6 goals. I do feel that the board should have been involved prior to being asked to approve them. We have our strategic plan, we have our, and again, I'm not interested in micromanaging the district, but I think it would be appropriate to perhaps, and I won't be here, but it would be, as a citizen, I would like to see the board kind of examine these and reaffirm them for the 2nd year. I think it's a big chunk of direction without having a voice from the board. So I'm not sure. I hope that the new board will continue to examine these and think about any areas that the board feels ought to be addressed. And so I guess, like I said, these goals make good sense to me, but as a board member, current board member, I feel a little bit excluded in not having some prior discussion and so on. Perhaps could have been at a work session or whatever, but that would be my comment.
Well, it's never too late. We don't have to adopt these goals. There's no problem not adopting them. We can backtrack a little bit and then wait for the new board to come on and then start with those new goals. This is a culmination, just so you know, of all the input and feedback that you've given us for the last couple of years that the cabinet brought forward. But you're right, there was no direct meeting with the board with discussion of these, but we can certainly do that. There's no timeline for these, I guess, other than 2 years.
That would be my question. Would a delay in approving these goals impact the operations? I can understand that having clarity might help our administrators develop plans and so on, but the fact that we do have 3 new members joining the board would seem to me to be respectful of them, to allow at least some discussion prior to approval.
No, I think that's a really good suggestion, Tom, actually, and then to table this would be my suggestion. Then we can have that work session in January or February to talk about the goals and then come up and approve those. I think it makes all the sense in the world.
But, and I did not attend the last 2 work sessions, actually. Didn't the buildings come back to the board with how they're going to address these goals?
They are, yep.
So if there's any ambiguity about what these goals, then if I'm sitting in the building, I'm going to wonder, well, what's up with that? So I would suggest, quickly, if there was an issue with any of these goals, they're fairly broad, obviously, but if the board had issues with them, we could elect to take that one off. If there's things to be added to them, we certainly can do that at any time. But I don't want to send a message to the district that, wait a minute, all the work you've done in setting goals for your buildings this year, and it is the end of November already, that you shouldn't do that because the board doesn't think that they had enough input on it. These goals really align with the goals that were in place before, so
They're all the
things have
same.
been added to it.
Yeah.
So it's not like a dramatic change in direction of the district.
No, they're pretty much the same as the vision statements.
So personally, I'd be in favor of approving these goals, knowing that they are goals only. They're not things that are going to be shut down a building or anything because they're not being followed. But allow the district to go forward with this. We can monitor it as we go along and make changes as we go along as a board. The new board can make those things as well. But I would hate to see the process stop at this point. Further discussion.
I'll just echo your thoughts, John. I would agree that continuously discussing goals is an important thing, and I think when we have new board members, we certainly want to discuss these, but at the moment, we're in the midst of a school year, and keeping our staff on track with the goals that they've been bringing to us the last couple months and having our endorsement seems like a valuable thing to do, and it doesn't mean that we won't be open to discussion and change of these goals even in the near future with three new board members. That's a discussion I hope we have.
Okay, any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carried 5-1. With Mr. Casper being the dissenting vote. Next item is discussion only, and it's the facility task force. And we did receive an update on that, and we will be hearing from probably several people. So come on up.
Okay, I think we're going to do it from over here. If that's okay.
Yep, and then do you have a mic up there?
I think we're going to grab this one, right?
Okay.
And I'm suggesting that only because I don't want to turn our back to the committee, because there's quite a few of them here, and we want to make them part of this conversation. So thank you for having us back. We're here to give you, I'll call it an update. I guess you could call it a report, but we're not done with all of the work yet. So this is an update on that. And really, I think the task force is probably recommending more than anything that you get more feedback from the community. And so we'll talk about where that fits into things as we go.
So for our agenda tonight, we're just going to talk about the task force composition and the process they went through, brief overview of the information that they reviewed. Much of their work was spent developing what are called findings and needs statements, which is kind of the conclusions of the information they reviewed, and where they think the facilities need improvements. We'll talk a little bit about the staff engagement process that we went through, which was Innovation Day, and then finally their recommendation and next steps. So I'm not going to list everybody off, but we've had a great group, many of which who are in our 2016 task force. Names are up on the screen, and many of them are here tonight. If people want to raise their hand, we'll actually ask you at the end if you're interested in commenting, but if you were on the task force, if you want to raise your hand. Got a great showing of those tonight here to see or to have this recommendation go forward. Oh, I keep forgetting to scroll. So this charge statement went to the board before their work began. Just wanted to remind those and those who might not be familiar of what the task force charge was. So they were to develop a comprehensive long-range facilities master plan with one or more scenarios for recommendation to the board that serves the district's educational goals, be financially attainable and sustainable, reflect the values and priorities of the communities of Faribault Public Schools, accommodate the enrollment in other programs, cover anticipated needs for the next 10 years, as well as recognize major issues beyond 10 years, be consistent with the strategic vision, and recommend optimal use of facilities along with a rationale for their recommendations. So that was the context through which the task force was looking at the district's facilities. Just a brief timeline, applications were due back end of May. Applicants were notified that first week of June, and then we've had 7 meetings since then. Couple in June, 1 in July, 1 in August. Some time was taken to do further community input late summer, beginning of the school year. There was also time taken to plan the Innovation Day event with staff that we'll talk a little bit more about. That was on Thursday, October 25th, an all-day event. And then 3 meetings in about the past month, so on October 16th, 30th, and then just this past Thursday, November 15th. And all those meetings were held here from 6 to 9 p.m. Innovation Day was an all-day event, but also here.
And just to remind everybody that this is the sort of this last step in the process, but it really goes back well over a year before that with the input sessions from the facilities and then the first round of the task force. So really a lot of work and a lot of participation by stakeholders.
So the types of information that the task force reviewed was just information about the facilities, how big they are, when they were added onto, things of that nature. Enrollment history and projections, update of the capacity analysis, the facility analysis report, which really speaks to the district's deferred maintenance. Safety and security was a topic of much discussion. Educational alignment with the district's strategic vision and programming. A little primer on school finance and what sort of funding options the district has. As well as a few survey results, so your thought exchange results on a few different occasions, and the post-election analysis that was done by Springstead. And then any community input. So at several times during the process, we asked task force members or the administration to go out and gather more feedback, which was always shared. So just quickly, the types of information that the task force reviewed was capacity. We'll just scroll right past this, an updated capacity chart of the district, and taking that into account over the district's slight decline in enrollment that has been experienced and is projected to continue, as well as deferred maintenance, next one, being a big topic, all the district's facilities and the different prioritizations of those deferred maintenance projects. And the task force spent lots of time talking about different ways to tackle those, learning about long-term facilities maintenance funding, what might be appropriate to go into a bond, what things are more urgent or less urgent, and taking recommendations from administration.
And to remind the board, this large number on the bottom of the screen is kind of the total liability, but it would be unusual for a school district to try to take all that on at one time. It's more likely that you will take it on in smaller chunks over time.
So after all that information review, which took the first several meetings, the task force spent time categorizing these needs to try to fit them into clear topics to study further. So those categories were safety and security, educational alignment, early learning, and deferred maintenance. And then on each of those topics, there was time spent in small groups over the course of 2 different meetings, essentially talking about what have we learned about this topic. So that's what we later termed findings or conclusions, kind of the summary of the information they reviewed, and what needs to be addressed. And those were categorized as need statements, or sometimes we called them criteria. So I'm going to try to go over these quickly, but we did spend a lot of time on them. So again, the findings are conclusions of the data, and the need statements are looking forward. So while the buildings have some level of front door security, visitors at all buildings but the middle school are still expected to check in at the main office on the honor system. The buildings having gaps in communications or inappropriate camera coverage or access to announcements. And then the idea of site safety, which we just spent time talking about with the abatement bonds. So buses and parents currently mixing on the street at drop-off and pickup time. So the need statements. Task force felt that every facility in the district needs to have a secure entrance to control and screen visitors. The importance of updated and additional security technology. So that's communications and PA systems, as well as camera systems, lockdown buttons, emergency strobes. And that every facility in the district needed to have pickup and drop-off procedures that are safe, with a recommendation that bus and parent drop-off traffic should be separated, so they shouldn't be intermingling.
And that first bullet really, at 3 of your buildings, is addressed by the grant that you got from the state. So this statement applies to those for some, but it doesn't get all of your buildings done. So we're carrying that forward as a part of the recommendation.
Under the topic of educational alignment, their finding was that the enrollment in the district is projected to decline over the next 5 years some. Lots of discussion around how educational programming and the space needs have changed since the buildings were built, and in particular, the number of programs and educational objectives that were not around at the times the buildings were built in the 50s and 60s. Some of which are mandated by the government and some are specific to Faribault, but that the buildings don't support them well now. And that the facilities need to support the educational vision and mission of the district. So the need statements. New educational demands to prepare students for the future, such as differentiation of instruction in both college and career readiness, are essential, and that the facilities need to support these. The elementary schools needing appropriate spaces for, and then there's a long list of we spent time listing the services that didn't exist when the buildings were built. So that ranges from math and reading intervention to support service to mental health and school psychologist specialists, title, speech therapy, occupational therapy, all things of that nature, and that the buildings need to have appropriate space for those services, and that the district needs to plan for some reduced enrollment, but also take into account any future changes. Early learning findings, you'll see in here, it says page 1 of 2. So McKinley Early Childhood Center is one of the oldest buildings in the district. There's some code compliance and antiquated systems. The early childhood education has been identified as an important part of the district's mission. It both helps serve the needs of young families and preparing our most needy learners to be successful. Next page. The district doesn't have space for additional early childhood. Actually, they expanded into the FEC this year due to increased demand. Increased funding for these programs at no cost to the parent continues to be made available, but you don't have anywhere to put these programs. And the district is currently seeing many families choose other school options. Exposing them to district programs before kindergarten may help retain them as they enroll into kindergarten. So under needs statements, the district needs to serve the community's preschool-age children who are currently not accessing preschool because of space limitations. And you need to plan for additional state and federal funding if it becomes available. Having appropriate restroom facilities is a major deficiency at McKinley. And the district providing reasonable spaces for staff and other programs. There's some programmatic elements at McKinley that are not currently working well. Okay, last but not least, deferred maintenance. The state system of funding is not set up to provide adequate support to properly maintain school facilities. That's when I said they got a small primer on school finance to understand essentially how districts accumulate deferred maintenance and how they generally handle it, and that your LTFM funding does not keep pace with your maintenance needs, and that investments are periodically needed to catch up. They understood that the 2009 bond referendum focused on $15 million of an identified $30 million of facility maintenance needs at that time. Major focuses were roofing and mechanical systems, and that the appearance of the buildings can influence the perception of users and the community. So under needs statements, learning environments need to have good indoor air and water quality and be healthy for students and staff. Student, staff, and the community need facilities that create a sense of school pride. And energy efficiency, code compliance, and accessibility deficiencies are high priorities to be addressed. So all of those statements were put into what was called, it's a little hard to see on here, a community engagement session worksheet. And this was a tool for task force members and administration to go out to many groups across the community. And Todd, I don't know if you want to speak to that, and really gather input on what people think about those needs statements and if they thought that they were important.
Yeah, so we had various meetings with the city and the chamber and other groups that we went through that whole list and talked about the 4 elements, and I use SEED as the acronym: safety and security, education alignment, early learning, and deferred maintenance. And really, the feedback I got is that the people were very appreciative of us going out there and actually asking for their feedback and their input about moving forward with this. The number one thing I heard was, is the event center on this? And the question, or the answer, as you have already seen, is that it's not on there. And that would be a project maybe later on that we can do with the city or the county and do something else. But the 4 items that were on there were actually well supported by the folks that we had, that we talked to. Everybody was anxious to figure out what the dollar amount was, of course, and we didn't do that until we figured out what all those needs were.
So part of that input also included reaching out to the teaching staff and try to get some ideas from them. So we had offered to lead a workshop with staff. So the district found, I don't know how many, about 20 or so staff, I think, and helped them attend this seminar during the day, this workshop. And we had a great time. The staff was very engaged, created a lot of excitement. The topic of that was really working on educational space and how your educational space could better serve kids in the programs that you do now. As was, I think, mentioned earlier, a lot of the buildings in the state have been built in a different time, and they don't house not only the specialists and support staff, but education is changing in the classroom too, and how can those classrooms better serve that purpose? So we spent a whole day with them, and we'll talk a little bit about the results of those in just a minute. Oh, I'm sorry, we have some shots of this. We used this room, brought them all in, and we brought our technology and actually did drafting with them and ended up building 3D models of the spaces by the end of the day.
So there was a group for each of the elementary schools, Lincoln, Jefferson, and Roosevelt, with representative staff, a group for the middle school, some McKinley staff joined the elementary groups, a group that focused on the middle school, and then a group that focused on the career and tech ed area of the high school, and some ALC representatives joined the high school group. So we had 5 total groups. So we'll get into those Innovation Day solutions in just a second. These were the diagrams you just saw about site safety improvements. So getting those off-street bus loops at Lincoln and Jefferson were a high priority of the task force. And then I won't go into detail because these are diagrams that were created for the MDE safety and security grants that you applied for. So you applied for all 6 of your learning facilities and you received 3. So Lincoln, Jefferson, and the high school were all funded. And that includes some addition and renovation at the main office to create secure vestibules, improvement of some of your communication systems, including visual alert strobes, and a couple other technology items, lockdown buttons. But the requests at McKinley, Roosevelt, and the middle school were not selected for grants. So the task force spent time talking about that it's important that those are taken care of in any potential bond going forward. And we'll have to figure out how those projects go together. So these are diagrams of that. Not entirely dissimilar with what was pursued in the 2016 task force work.
So then we'll talk a little bit about the Innovation Day. So again, the way that day works is we bring teachers in. We had, I think, 9 of our staff here to support that, which we donated as part of this to the district. We sit down with them and work through a 3-step day, part of the day basically, where we look at different things that are going on in education, educational facilities. Then we spend the middle part of the day brainstorming with them some of what they might imagine a space to be. And those are some of we had lots of fun. We bring Play-Doh and markers and all kinds of fun stuff. And then the last part of the day, we actually build it in the computer, and that's what you'll see the results of today. In order to make that something that we can tackle in one day with them, we really limit the scope of it. So in most cases, what we did is we took 1 grade level at the elementary schools, which is about 4 classrooms, and then about an equivalent amount of space at the middle school and the high school. So at Lincoln, it was 4 classrooms, and if you know that building, these could be any 4 classrooms, but there were some specific ones there. And this is the design that the group came up with, so just to describe it, this is meant to still replace those 4 classrooms, so there's still 4 classrooms worth of students in there. What this design does is it creates a lot more flexibility in how they can go about doing things, including incorporating some of those support staff that your district uses for kids that have needs within these spaces. One of the big parts to understand this concept, and it's common to some of the other buildings, is that this design really wouldn't have a teacher assigned to a room. It would be 4 teachers using this space however they see best fit for that day to suit the students. So they might move within these 4 spaces to do different things. So there's some small group spaces, there's some spaces that are more designed towards reading or support things like that. This one actually has kind of a little lab space, so it would give them a place to do more active activities, whether that be art or science or whatever that might be. I'll skip up to the next images because they help you sort of visualize that a little bit better. So this space, if you can imagine right through this slot through the middle of the design, that's actually the existing hallway. What this does is takes down some of those walls in that space to create essentially 1, 2, 3, 4 teaching spaces, and then consolidate the student storage or the locker space into what we call the mudroom. That would allow that stuff to be adjacent to the classrooms but not in the way of everything. And then there's some flexibility and visibility built into here so that we can, for instance, this wall can open up so that space can flow out into this. This space can open up and so there can be some team teaching going around through there. And I think all of the groups had a lot of creativity and a really out-of-the-box thinking to come up with these ideas. I'll run through all of them. So then, here's another shot. So here's a ground level shot looking at the Lincoln space. That couch is a fun piece. It's kind of a presentation thing. You can have kids sitting in the couch, and then there's a bench on the back of it, so students can sit in 2 levels on that. So Jefferson, they started out with a very similar space to work with, so 4 classrooms across from each other. They actually came up with a similar kind of a solution, but different in its form. The intent would be the same, though. It's a way to use that same square footage to serve 4 classes, but be flexible about that so that each of them can have some different activities. This one is based around 2 more or less conventional classrooms, but these walls would be operable so that they can open them up, and then you can see that the whole area would be open to itself. They incorporate a little bit smaller resource area for things like STEM or activities, so there's some sinks and some counters in there. They also incorporated that idea of a mudroom to have student storage space. And then there's some small group spaces that would be great for officing the staff. So if they don't have their own dedicated classroom, it would give them a space to kind of have their stuff, keep their teaching materials in that space, and then small group space to have specialists come in or to break kids off into small groups to do things. And here's kind of an overhead view of that, so you can see here's those 2 more or less conventional classrooms, and then really these become 2 non-traditional classrooms that allow different things. You can imagine that kind of a space would be great for things like reading or small group collaboration work that the students might do. And here's a ground level shot of what that might look like. Roosevelt, as you know, is already organized into a pod layout, which is a little bit more flexible for them to team teach already. So that group took a little bit different approach to that. One of the ways that we make that project fun for them is we don't put a lot of constraints on them. So in this one, they got rid of the bathrooms because they don't like the bathrooms being right in the middle of the classrooms there. And whether or not this would go forward as a project, that's something to debate and the cost of that. But what they replaced it with was some small group classrooms again to create some flexibility, and then that central area became more of a breakout learning space and some more appropriate furniture in there so that it allows some different activities to happen. The other big move is they have modified the walls a little bit. So these 2 walls have some kind of barn doors on them so you can open up the classroom and flex out into that space more. And then this wall between these 2 classrooms becomes an operable partition again, so you can get a larger space to maybe work with 2 or 3 classes at a time. And here's a shot of what that might look like. And some of these show a lot of glass. Like this wall looks like glass in here, but that's only because we couldn't get the computer to get the glass out of there. There's no need to have that one be glass, so that was
They
proposed
wanted
to be
marker board
okay.
actually. But
Yeah, that would be a marker board. And then a ground level shot of that in that central space, looking into those conference rooms and the other classrooms. At the middle school, we also took a 4 classroom space. I will say that this group was desperately trying to break out of the walls and do more. They wanted to affect more square footage, and actually in the name of building more collaboration with their peers. We unfortunately weren't prepared for that because we had to build these things in the computer before we got here, and we didn't build enough. So we constrained them, and I think that artificially constrained their solution a little bit. In their case, what they really did is designed a lot of flexibility into the space. So their proposal was to take these walls and make them operable so that you could actually get this whole thing turned into one big learning lab, or any combination thereof. It could be 2 rooms or 3 rooms combined together. The other piece that really shows how they were trying to reach out beyond these 4 rooms is these walls here were modified to create some, again, barn doors in there and some visibility so that they could collaborate with peers across the way. And here's a shot of what that might look like. And in this case, I think they did want some visibility in here, but again, some of these might be more opaque or might be whiteboard surfaces. And then a real big part that creates flexibility in a space like this is furniture. So over the last several years, furniture manufacturers have really had a revolution in furniture for schools. And it is having a profound effect on what teachers are able to do with their students in a classroom because it can be reconfigured so quickly. Even just the shapes of desks have changed radically so that they nest together in multiple ways where you can have different group sizes and light enough and on wheels that they can reconfigure that sort of at a moment's notice and do different things with their students, which is great for adapting. And here's a ground level shot of what that might look like. Oh, another shot at the middle school. And then at the high school, we really looked at a subset of the tech labs up there with the idea that we know the district, or you know the district is focusing on where you might go with career technical education and kinds of things. So these are the metal shop and the welding shop. Yep. So this is the solution here, which was very little construction, really. It had to do with furniture, and we are assuming that part of that program would actually probably have a significant investment in some different kind of machinery that was more in tune with your local industries so that students can gain experience on that kind of equipment. So here's a shot of that. So the welding lab was more or less left as it is. The other rooms, there's some partitions put in here. Again, some of those barn doors that let you close off space and use it as a small group space, but then you can open it up and have kids travel between them. And then here's an example of kind of a maker space. So there's some notion of milling machines and CNC machines in there along with classroom space to mix all that together. And then some ground level shots of that. A big part of, I think, what that group came up with was the idea that it would be great to get more people involved in those programs. And so just creating some transparency in there that would allow other students in the building to see what happens in these spaces, especially when if they were to get updated and have some higher tech modern equipment on it, that would be a great advertisement for the program and hopefully get some kids more engaged in that. Another shot of what they might imagine that for.
So those were related to safety and security and the educational alignment. For early learning and ALC, ALC kind of falls under the educational alignment. The task force had us review several options. So for early learning, options related to doing additions and renovations at the current McKinley site were explored in a couple different fashions, as well as a new early learning center. And then for the ALC, additions and renovations at their current facility, a new building, or conversion of the current McKinley site to an alternative learning center were all reviewed as options, and we'll go over what was selected in just a second.
Question.
Of course.
How do you justify saving those two buildings, remodeling? How do you really justify that?
Well, I don't think, let me put some of this in perspective. We're not here to tell you today to do any one thing or another, and I don't think the task force is. I think we've gotten things to the point where it would be interesting to get a little bit more input, and we know that the district is considering doing a survey of the community, a scientific survey of the community, and I think we've got it to the point where it makes sense to go get some feedback, because I think we need to test that idea. The last task force arrived at the idea that those buildings, it would make more sense for the district to replace them. Your community obviously didn't support that, and it's a little unclear what exactly they didn't support and where you should go. So what we're recommending is you move this task force recommendation forward to get more input, and then after that input you decide things like that, whether or not you think you can support replacing facilities or not. And so you'll see this does suggest replacing one of them at this time, but that's just a recommendation to get more input at this time.
So at a high level, task force summary, a recommendation for further exploration. Safety and security would be to create secure vestibules at all facilities, some of which would be funding with your MDE grants. Updating, expanding security technology, including your camera systems, which were not an allowable expenditure in the MDE grants. And separating the bus and parent traffic at Jefferson and Lincoln, and wherever your early learning facility is, making sure that it has that same setup too. Under educational alignment, there was lots of discussion about the Innovation Day projects and where your community might land on supporting them. So the recommendation was to go forward on testing potential solutions in a survey on how you could scale those, whether that be just kind of a pilot project or a learning lab in a particular building, or what it would mean to affect that kind of change across the district. So the idea was to test several different price points and see where people's support might lie. And then for early learning, they recommend, and I guess I have these next to each other because they seem to be somewhat related. So I think the task force was struggling with the idea that both the McKinley site and the current ALC site need quite a bit of work, but they're not entirely sure that your community will support two new buildings at this time. So the recommendation was to try to find a compromise in the middle. So the recommendation is to explore building a new early learning center. Lots of discussion about where that might be, what a site would mean for that, so I've listed that under italics. And then for the ALC, the task force thought that your community would support the idea of reusing some of your current investment and turning the current McKinley site into an ALC. As much renovation was a lot of discussion on last Thursday evening, and would want some further vetting. You'll see on our next slide we've got some recommendations on some more due diligence that needs to happen. But they thought somewhere two new buildings might be too much. And then for deferred maintenance, really the idea that you need to explore support with the community via survey on tax tolerance, as I think it's hard to build a deferred maintenance package without knowing which buildings you might still have and how much really you can afford in the end. So trying to balance your LTFM funding and some work that might be in a bond. So we do have a pared down recommendation from administration that included about $20 million worth of projects, the most urgent at every building, but that needs to be reevaluated after the survey. So I have a big draft on here. You'll see the categories across the top and the buildings across the left. Just cost estimates for safety and security at about 4.9, and about $1 million of that is funded through your MD safety and security grants, and you voted to move forward with exploring using abatement bonding for some of that work as well. The educational alignment would be the cost estimate for the current design of the Innovation Day projects. Talked to the task force a lot about what it would mean to do that kind of work across the entire district, which would obviously be much more expensive, but it could be done in a different way. So we talked about testing different price points. The new Early Learning Center being at about $21.1 million, not including land. We have a placeholder for land. You'll see it towards the bottom there, but not knowing the site, that's very difficult to estimate at this time. If you need to develop utilities or drag a road out somewhere, soil conditions, things of that nature. And then our deferred maintenance, there is a prioritized list by building of about $20 million developed with administration recommendation of the most urgent projects by building, but that needs further discussion. And then under the ALC, you'll see a recommendation of a renovation/addition project at current McKinley to transform it into an ALC for about $4.8 million. So the subtotal in the bottom right-hand corner of the box is 56. You add a couple line items there for land costs and bond issuance, which are both placeholders at this time, but the understanding that you do have a couple other funding sources potentially coming in, which brings it to a cost of somewhere around $55.6 million.
And again, I want to be clear, the task force does not recommend you go out for a bond for that right now. Half of the things in this, I think the task force feels very strongly about, that there's a lot of consensus on the group. Safety and security, the early learning solution, and the idea of switching those buildings, and doing some level of deferred maintenance was all things I think that had a lot of support from the group. Some of these other things about how much educational alignment or that reconfiguring buildings, it got a little bit more gray, and I think they're really looking for more input before a decision. And I would say the amount of deferred maintenance is another sort of a variable, how much to ask taxpayers in a bond versus how much to do over time with your other funding sources.
Have you looked at the economics of the community? How much can they afford?
That's what the upcoming scientific survey would look to test. So test some of these solutions and overall tax tolerance.
Because we are a poor community. That's been said before. And I don't see it improving. You know, maybe that's a big thing why it went down, is that pure economics, possibly.
And so that number could be anything from 0 to more than 55, depending on which options you choose. And I think what your question is an extremely important one, is what is your community going to support? And that's why we're recommending to go get more input before a decision is made about how much.
Because the last one, without the event center of the 23.1 million, just the academics, you're in this mid 60 million. Was I about correct about mid?
Yeah.
You're about right.
So you're not too far off with that 55, 56 million dollars.
And a little bit less.
A little bit less. Well, you're only building theoretically one building, not two.
The makeup of the pack, some of the common themes are still the same, but the solutions are slightly different after more input, especially from staff. Yeah, Chip.
Thanks for all your hard work on this, and thanks to the committee for all their time on this. The early learning building that's on here, that 21 million, would that leave kindergarten at the elementaries?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the recommendations, or not necessarily recommendations, but the dollar amounts that are included for primarily Lincoln and Jefferson. Is that going to? Is there enough construction there that's going to force all those buildings to be brought up to handicap accessibility and meet all the ADA codes that we currently don't today? And has that been explored?
So the state can compel you when they're doing the review of the projects to spend up to 20% of your construction budget on ADA accessibility upgrades, but not more than 20% in their current, under their current review procedures, they've been enforcing that. So we'll want to make sure that's a great line item under deferred maintenance once we know exactly what projects are happening in each school. Want to make sure we have budgets to do that.
So my question is, right, we're in this chart, you have, ballpark $2 million for both Lincoln and Jefferson between safety and security and educational alignment. If you just did those $2 million, is that going to trip the mechanism that the whole building's going to have to be brought up to meet the ADA code?
No, again, the ADA code, which was written in 1991, has a provision that they can compel you to spend up to 20%. So if you only spend 2.1 million.
So in that case, you could spend up to 400,000.
Right.
But is that included in this, or no?
No, that would come out of that 20 million in deferred maintenance. So once we understand exactly what will happen in each project, we'll want to layer that on top.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great question. And improving accessibility to the buildings was a focus of the task force, absolutely.
So I think it'd be great to get, we didn't really sort of script this or pick people, but if a couple, 2-3 people from the task force want to come up and talk about the process a little bit, and then if the board has any other questions, or especially questions of the task force, I think that'd be great. Any volunteers?
Then Ruth Ann can go after you, and then Jessica, and then Nicole. Yeah.
I'm Carrie Tuma, and I was on this task force. The process was extreme. It was very intense, I think very thoughtful, and thorough. We tried to solicit as many different opinions from community members, parents, through the thought exchange, through little meetings that we sent Todd out on, and really, really, really struggled with, I think, all of the ideas from the last bond and new ones coming in. I think that it's a very responsible proposal at this point, particularly because the main objective right now is to get even more feedback from the public on these ideas. And I think that's imperative, because I think that trying to guess what the public thought or want, the reasons why they shot the last bond down, I think is just guessing. And so I think that survey will be really, really important, and perhaps can reflect some of what we gathered or are proposing. So I really thought it was smart and essential that the teachers or staff, more importantly the staff, was brought in so that we could get the experts who are going to be using these buildings and who have contact with our kids every day, what they tell us they need for change to deal with the changing children in our district. So those were all really, I think, important aspects, and I feel solid on what we're bringing to the community, because I feel like it's a really responsible, moderate proposal at this point in time. So it was long. I think it was fruitful. I think we had a good summation last Thursday, and look forward to hearing what the public has to say about it. Really. Any questions that I can?
Somebody else.
Ruth Ann, you want to move up there and talk a little bit about that? Yeah, our early childhood piece. Travis, I'm going to call you up there next. So put the pressure.
Hello, I'm Ruth Ann Collins, and I'm over at the McKinley Building. I'm one of the staff there, and I'm very impressed by the process that we had. In June, we asked why. Why do we need to do this? And as we went through the summer, we developed the need. So we saw the need statements up here. I'm going to take a deep breath. Hold on. And then after we got to the need statement, then we brought everybody in to give the innovative ideas for the classrooms. And speaking from the staff, I think that just gives you integrity to what the proposal brings. And it's, I want to say, the design in every aspect of this has had every Falcon in mind, every student. And I got to catch my breath again. Hold on.
Take your time.
Caught me by surprise.
Sorry.
That's okay, that's okay. I was thinking how I would do this. So with every Falcon in mind, the research behind every corner of the square footage that we were talking about is intense. And we felt it every time that we came to the meetings, how important this was for Faribault, how important this was for the future of the education, for those buildings in Faribault, and more importantly, how we wanted to have the success rate of all of our students graduating from Faribault move on and go into very good, successful employment. And I'm very proud to be a part of this. I know you can't hear it in my voice right now.
No, you're
it's
good.
still a little shaky. But I guess the emphasis for me has always been education. And with early childhood special education as my background, I look at all students, all levels. Where do we make mobility happen? Where do we make education as a success? Proud, very proud to be a part of Faribault Public Schools, and I'm very proud to be a part of this task force. And for the community to hear this, I think the emphasis is on, look what we did, look what we brought to you. And for every dollar that we do have a measurement of educational alignment with that. And that's what I want to leave you with. Very important. Thank you.
All right, Travis.
So I'm Travis McCauley. I've been involved in the community. We've lived here about 17 years. I've been pretty involved with some stuff. I learned a ton. I think that in looking at one of the things that really hit me the most was, I don't think a lot of people understand how schools get funded. And even when I talked to people in the last bond and then looked at the deferred maintenance that first hit when it was $90 million, and I was like, where are we going to get this? I don't think people realize how the system is set up for the state to have some responsibility, and then the community as well has some responsibility. And so for me, in learning that and then looking at how those decisions get made and being involved in some of them, yeah, there's a lot of work, and it's how I think we can message what we're doing more effectively. But I walked out. I think it's a good use. The proposal that we've kind of put together is a great use of, we've got to do it. There's needs in the community that we're by law required to do, and what's the most effective way to do that? And I think this one did it.
Last, I was going to see if Nicole or Daisy would want to go, or both of you at the same time. Okay, Nicole.
I've kind of said this, you guys have probably heard this more than once out of me, but I look at this as a community problem, not just a school district problem. I think it is our obligation as a community to provide exceptional education to our kids in our community, with hopefully some community development coming, Daikin expanding and adding many jobs. I thought I heard around 500 jobs to the community. We have a workforce and jobs that are in Faribault, but I see people living elsewhere, living outside of the community, sending their kids to surrounding communities, and I look at that and say, why? So are we doing enough in our schools to keep them here, to want to get them to move here and support our community that way? So I think with these improvements that we could be making to our schools, that would hopefully solve that problem and help keep people living here and supporting our community that way. So I've just said this all along. I look at this as a community situation. I don't want to say problem, but issue that I think it's our job as community members to help support and step up so that we don't see our enrollment going down. I'd like to see our enrollment increasing, therefore our community increases, therefore our businesses are more supported locally, and so on and so on. So that's just the way I've always looked at this situation.
Thank you.
So I hope that's a testament to this process a little bit, that we can unsolicited bring people up and they can be that articulate about what this proposal is, which I think is great. Thank you all for voicing up, and I'm sure the rest of the group that's here could do the same thing. They've all gone through the same process. I do also want to, in case we didn't emphasize enough, thank them for all the time that they've put into this. Some of them, it's up into the double digits of hours, a lot of long nights, so thank you very much for being a part of all this. Any further questions from the board? And please, if you'd like to direct any to the task force, that's part of why they came.
Once again, just a big thank you. Richard and I did it last year, and it's a lot of time away from your family and kids and everybody else. And so thank you for doing it. And Todd, my question to you would be, when are we doing the Springstead survey that we've approved?
Yeah, so that's a good segue into the timeline and talk a little bit about where we are and where we're sitting right now. You guys are the first to see this presentation, and we want to make sure that we're giving you and make sure we're getting the feedback from you first, obviously, for this process. And as we move forward with this, the next month and a half or so, Matt and I and anybody else that wants to tag along will be going to various groups. Hopefully the city will allow us to come in and talk a little bit in the chamber and some of the other community groups to get some feedback and see whether or not we're on the right track. The survey, now that we have the data, we'll be able to put together. I'd like to see if we can run that in January and have some results at the January 28th board meeting. And it'll be interesting to see what the community, or how the community responds to some of these ideas. Certainly we want to figure out what that tax tolerance is too for this community. And then again, the board would review that. Moving on, at the February work session, we'd talk about it a little bit more with the board. And then ideally, if we could get a determination by the board at the February meeting whether or not we want to move ahead with a bond issue or hold off, that would be kind of the timeline that we're looking at. Very tentative, of course, but that's kind of the idea.
So Todd, just to clarify, if you discussed it and had approval in February, then a vote would take place in November? Is that the correlation?
That would be probably the logical correlation. It'd be almost too late for a May. I think Kathy would kill me if we said May with the voting thing, so it'd probably have to be November.
In addition, some of what you might consider asking the voters for would only be able to be done in November.
Right.
If you decide to do some operating with this, that would have to be a November election.
Part of the discussion at the last meeting was how does the 7-period day affect this? And we had some discussion. We'll put that in the survey too to see if we, first of all, if we need additional classrooms at the high school to support a 7-period day, how that would affect the dollar amount. And then second of all, if we have an operating levy, as Paul said, attached to that, we can only have that vote in November.
Todd, do you work with Wold on determining questions that for the survey, or do you work with the committee that just got done, or where do you come up with all the questions to make sure that we're asking the questions that the committee really wants to have answered?
Sure. So Springstead would be your specialist in that. So they're the expert that would really develop the questions, but we would help advise them on the topics that we've been discussing and how to sort of manicure the questions to get the right data back from the public.
And they'll probably go back and forth, John, and probably Jason too, to figure out some of those things what the board would be comfortable with this as well.
I do want to say, as part of that process, these amounts that we gave you tonight, part of the reason I'm being a little soft on them is they're not really done. There's some things that we'd certainly want to do some more due diligence on before you committed to doing this with your public. For instance, the Innovation Day thing was a great experience that involved a couple dozen educators, but really we'd want to go to each site and talk to the whole site, or figure out some way to get input that's a little bit more in-depth from that one-day workshop before you went and put that one out to the public, and as well as estimating other things and what's exactly in deferred maintenance. So there's some more work to be done there too.
School boards tell the story and then ultimately ask the question. And what you've provided us helps us frame the story. And it isn't really a story, it's presenting factual information. That it's our responsibility to take this and then combine it with what we find out from the survey and be open and honest with the community about what we feel is an appropriate question to ask, and that question comes in the form of an election and the chance for the voters to weigh in on that. So this being accomplished is a huge chunk of us being able to talk to the community, to explain what it is that we want for our students, and to be able to ask some additional questions as we go forward, and ultimately the community will decide that. I don't know that the relative wealth of a community is directly related to the success of bond issues or levy issues. Certainly not if it's presented, whatever is presented is in the view of the public, something that's needed and something that we want for our students. And so that should be our goal, so that we have something that makes sense to every voter, and they can make their decisions as they see fit, but at least what they see makes sense, and hopefully can support that as we go forward. But it's our responsibility to make sure that what we present to them is what is needed and is going to help propel this district forward. So sincere thank you to everybody involved in this. It's a ton of work, and we didn't have to do any of it. So, and thank you to Todd and the administration and to Wold Architects for your role in this. And hopefully this is going to keep going forward and look positive and be successful.
Thank you. And thank Paul and Sal very much for coming out and presenting. Thank you.
Okay, other items of information. Do we have any school board members with reports?
Mr. Chair, I'll be attending the delegate assembly up in St. Louis Park November 30th and December 1st to vote on resolutions brought before that group. And then I'll report back at December 10th, whatever it is, next board meeting.
Very good. Anyone else? Superintendent Sesker.
So a few things. Last Saturday, I was able to watch the dance team, their first tryout performance. I guess it was more of a prelim to what they're going on. They did a workshop up in Cannon Falls with Stewartville, and they did very well. And then I zipped down to Faribault and watched the school play. And kudos to, again, Director Paul Johnson for all of his work, and it was an excellent play, very well done. Went to after hours at Paradise Theater and enjoyed some refreshments there and was able to make some connections. Was also at the Ratwick Law Conference up at the Earl Brown Center. Rob was there too with Carrie and one other teacher, so it was nice to see them. I was on KDHL with Matt Steichen, and we had a very nice interview with Gordy, as always. The C Committee's been meeting. I met 3 times this last week. So Wednesday we had a C Legislative Committee to create the platform, and then Friday was our General Assembly, and then this morning I had an executive meeting, and they, for some reason, re-elected me as treasurer. Anne-Marie talked about the Somali parent group. That was very fun, and then, of course, we've been meeting with the facility task force quite a bit. So it's been a busy couple of weeks, but it's very enjoyable too. That's all I have.
In your continued role as treasurer of C, I would encourage you to use the same report that Margot Nash always used. Some money came in and some money went out.
That's right. And then I depend on Dick Berge to make sure that I'm right when I say that.
Okay, I don't see any other comments or any other items, so is there a motion to adjourn?
Are we going to talk about the dates?
Oh, well, yeah, we've got some committee
I'm
meetings.
wondering if there's a finance meeting December 3rd.
That's actually been canceled.
Okay.
Okay. All right, and the next regular board meeting is December 10th. A little abbreviated schedule because it's December. Okay, anything else? Although it's been moved and seconded that we adjourn.
Need a second.
Didn't get a second.
Second.
Now it's been seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion